Justice has become social justice. It's become mob justice. Whatever the mob says must go. That's the way that our judicial system has been infected at this point. And all we have to do is look at the most recent few days to see exactly how that has taken place. I'll be getting into that and more on The William Hall Show. Alright, welcome back to the show. So getting into just the last time that I'm really going to be going through this entire story, because there's so much here and there's so much in this trial, and I feel like a lot of people don't truly understand what really took place in this Derek Chauvin trial. So I'll be kind of just ending and I guess giving my final comments on that, and then we'll go into some other stuff a little bit later. So starting off here, if you aren't already aware, Derek Chauvin was convicted of all three charges in the recent trial with the death of George Floyd. So that includes the second-degree felony murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Okay, first of all, none of this makes sense just in the sense that you can't really be guilty of all of these at one time. So they stacked on all of these, and most of these actually don't make any sense. I think the manslaughter one for some people may have been the most justifiable one, if any, but the murder charges don't work because all those are kind of come pre-packaged with this idea that you were killing somebody intentionally, of which the prosecution had no actual evidence of in the first place. So getting into a little bit about what's going on here, here's a little bit of the clip about what that looked like when they finished announcing that he was guilty on all charges.
Revoke the defendant's bail and remand him into custody pending sentencing.
Bail is revoked, bond is discharged, and the defendant is remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff. Anything further?
All
right. Thank you. We're adjourned.
So yeah, there he's being handcuffed and taken off to jail at that point. And now, as you probably all expected, Joe Biden had to make comments about this as well.
It was a murder in the full light of day, and it ripped the blinders off for the whole world to see. The systemic racism the Vice President just referred to. The systemic racism is a stain on our nation's soul. The knee on the neck of justice for Black Americans. Profound fear and trauma. The pain, the exhaustion that Black and brown Americans experience every single day.
You know, this is real rich coming from the same guy that authored the 1994 crime bill. The crime bill that incarcerated a historic amount of Black people for stupid crimes. I mean, this is the same guy, by the way, that was actually authoring that, believe it or not, and he's the one talking about systemic racism. Look, keep in mind, folks, Joe Biden has been in government for 47 years. If there's any systemic racism, he's the system. He's a part of that system that he's trying to rail against. So you also had AOC saying that the Chauvin conviction in Floyd's death is not justice.
So no, this verdict is not justice. Frankly, I don't even think we call it full accountability because there are multiple officers that were there. It wasn't just Derek Chauvin. And I also don't want this moment to be framed as this system working because it's not working. And that's what creates a lot of complexity in this moment.
Okay, except it is justice. What do you want? I mean, that's the thing that I'm so confused about when I see these Democrats complaining about this, and there's more clips to come, by the way. But what are they wanting here? The guy got convicted of 3 crimes, of which honestly don't make any sense, especially when they're all put together like that. How in the world is it that this is not justice? It's never good enough. That's the problem that we have with these people these days, is that for some reason, it's like, what more do you really want? Seriously, I'm honestly asking that question. What more do you want? And when is enough enough? Because I have a very sneaking suspicion that it never is enough, because that's the way that Democrats are always behaved with this type of stuff. So they got what you would think that they would want, but of course, like I said, they never are accepting that as being enough for them. So Kamala Harris also had to chime on this issue as well.
Listen. First, I want to thank the jury for their service, and I want to thank Mr. Floyd's family for your steadfastness. Today, we feel a sigh of relief. Still, it cannot take away the pain. A measure of justice isn't the same as equal justice. This verdict brings us a step closer, and the fact is, we still have work to do. We still must reform the system. Last summer, together with Senator Cory Booker and Representative Karen Bass, I introduced the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. This bill would hold law enforcement accountable and help build trust between law enforcement and our communities. This bill is part of George Floyd's legacy. The President and I will continue to urge the Senate to pass this legislation, not as a panacea for every problem, but as a start. This work is long overdue. America has a long history of systemic racism. Black Americans, and Black men in particular, have been treated throughout the course of our history as less than human. Black men are fathers and brothers and sons and uncles and grandfathers and friends and neighbors. Their lives must be valued in our education system, in our healthcare system, in our housing system, in our economic system, in our criminal justice system, in our nation.
It's actually pretty crazy considering the fact that Joe Biden, the author of the 1994 crime bill, which incarcerated a ton of black people, is kind of partnered with Kamala Harris, a person that also incarcerated a historic amount of black people in California for marijuana, nonviolent drug crimes, things like that, minor drug offenses. I mean, both of them have locked up so many black people between just the two of them that it's honestly just comical seeing them come out talking about systemic racism. And the fact is that, don't get this stuff twisted here, everything she's saying there is an absolute lie about black people, black men being incarcerated more or just being brutalized more. That doesn't happen. There's literally no statistics that support that. They show the opposite. White people are actually more likely to get shot by police. They're the ones that are winding up actually facing more of this brutality if you're actually looking at the statistics, but they don't want to do that. They want to take the little 9 cases that might have happened in a year, most of which are vastly justified, and treat that as, for some reason, being this massive epidemic that everyone should be worried about. Meanwhile, you have to actually be committing crimes in the first place to be putting yourself in that position. So this other guy, Jason Johnson, I guess he normally kind of chimes in on a lot of these issues on MSNBC and other networks like that. Talked about the Derek Chauvin trial as well, and basically saying and talking about the whole him being guilty on all charges.
I actually always thought that he would be found guilty because it's sort of a cultural makeup call. But I'm not happy. I'm not pleased. I don't have any sense of satisfaction. I don't think this is a system working. I don't think this is a good thing. What this says to me is that in order to get a nominal degree of justice in this country, that a black man has to be murdered on air, viewed by the entire world, there have to be a year's worth of protests and a phalanx of other white police officers to tell one white officer that he was wrong in order to get one scintilla of justice. That doesn't make me feel happy. That doesn't make me feel satisfied. It makes me worry about what's going to happen when these other officers are held on trial. It makes me upset all the more that we didn't have this for Breonna Taylor. It makes me concerned about what's going to happen in the trial for Ahmaud Arbery. So, no, I mean, this is not the system working. This is a makeup call. This is the justice system trying to say that, hey, this is one bad apple, because that's how this is going to be interpreted. It's going to be this one bad apple. He got in trouble. Yay, blah, blah, blah. And yet there's still going to be young black men and women across this country being shot today, tomorrow, and 2 weeks from now, because unless we have some radical reform, there's no lesson learned.
And once again, what this proves to me is that it's never enough. Just in the same light that we look at Democrats or the far left, the SJWs on Twitter, and we say, and they say they do this canceling routine, as we know they do in many different situations. They go in and they tell somebody, you're canceled. We're not going to use your products anymore. We're going to boycott you, or basically try to get rid of you off of the entire internet, ruin your life and everything over something that you did 10 years ago. And if you go in and you say, hey guys, I apologize, like it was a different time, I didn't understand, or I was ignorant, you can say whatever you want for your apology. But what do? It's not good enough. It's never good enough. So what we've learned is that you don't apologize to the mob. You just don't. You don't bend the knee to them, because it never will be enough. It's not like they'll get off your back all of a sudden just because because you did something for them. And this is the exact same thing in a different light with this whole jury situation. It doesn't matter what they charge this guy with. People are always going to be upset. And now they're already setting up the narrative saying that this isn't over. This doesn't stop us from complaining. We're going to keep complaining. And they're going to keep doing it. The more that this happens, there's almost no point in pretending as if any of this stuff is making them happy, when over and over and over again, we've seen them just within the next day being like, okay, cool, but no, it's not good enough for us. Not good enough for us. That kind of attitude towards everything. And of course, you have some Democrats acting very, very, very weird about the George Floyd incident as well. You had Nancy Pelosi that kind of got everyone mad. She made the people on the left mad. She made people on the right mad with his comment. But here she goes talking about George Floyd.
So again, thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice, for being there to call out to your mom. How heartbreaking was that? Call out for your mom. I can't breathe. But because of you, and because of thousands, millions of people around the world who came out for justice, your name will always be synonymous.
So obviously, that's a weird one there. And honestly, I think we'll see a lot more of the Democrats coming out and actually trying to cancel her over this. I think they already are trying to do that to get her to resign. And newsflash, is not going to happen, of course, but there was this guy that tweeted out, the most tone-deaf and ignorant thing imaginable. Pelosi does not see George Floyd as a man wrongfully murdered, but as a prop. Well, I think the guy that was actually saying this is a Democrat, but let's be honest here. Democrats in the whole party, everybody, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the people that are commenting on this whole issue, all of them are seeing this as a prop. I don't understand how they don't see this. Every Democrat that's commenting about this whole BLM thing with George Floyd and whatnot and these other incidents are only using this to push policies. That's what it comes down to. It's justification for policies. Think about it like this. Let's take a second just to look at the difference between a conservative and a liberal, okay? A conservative generally has a very good outlook of the world. Of course, we complain, there's things that can be fixed, but we all understand that there's always going to be evil and just things that we don't like in the world. We understand that. Democrats are the only ones trying to create some weird utopia where they think things are going to work perfectly. And conservatives are saying, things aren't going to ever be perfect, guys. Like, just let it go. Let these things work themselves out. Like, it's a heart problem, not a policy thing that you can just throw into the government and expect it to fix all the world's problems. That's a massively stark difference. Conservatives are concerned about trying to make sure that everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Keep in mind the happiness part at the very end there. And liberals are looking at making you be afraid of everything. We talked about this a little bit on the last show when I was covering the guy from CNN that was getting from the expose from Project Veritas, where we're going into this idea that liberals are consistently trying to say, be afraid of X, be afraid of conservatives, be afraid of the virus, afraid of capitalism, of rich people, of the climate. Everything that they try to push is about being afraid. And in this situation, it's be afraid of the police. Be afraid of any white person because you think that the system is rigged against you. You need to be afraid of leaving your home because you need to feel, we're going to make you feel like you're going to get gunned down in the street for no reason. And completely lying and misrepresenting the facts to get to that conclusion. So it's in the best interest of conservatives to keep you happy. It's in the best interest of Democrats to keep you in fear. Keep that in mind, because they can't push what they want to push if you're not afraid. That is a massive, massive stark difference between the two different types of beliefs and just world look ideologies in general that we have going on right now in the United States. So the entire Democrat Party uses this stuff all the time, and we know that. She goes on and says, your name will be synonymous with justice. Okay, really? I mean, how does that work? When you're talking about a guy that literally held a pregnant woman at gunpoint, held the gun to her stomach while she was pregnant, trying to rob her. How in the world is that the face of justice? Or synonymous with justice? What it's synonymous for is the left's lies, the blatant lies about who this guy really was. And I don't know if you're noticing the religious undertones, but they're there. They are. I mean, she's looking up in kind of into the sky when she's talking about thanking George Floyd for sacrificing himself. She's treating this guy like Jesus. And you see a lot of these left-wing people that are doing this, and they want to act like they're not. But remember, George Floyd was buried in a gold casket. A gold casket, folks. There are people that have memorials to him that are basically praying to this guy, that are trying to memorialize this guy into the saint of some sort, this sacrificial lamb on which we have been able to expose the sins of the world or something. It's absolutely ridiculous, and they're going to deny it, but I'm telling you, it's there. It really is. And you're seeing that right now. There's nobody sacrificing themselves for any of this. And especially somebody that had the life of George Floyd. It's all built on a massive lie. More than one lie, many lies. But mainly on this lie that he was somehow this good person. That he wasn't ridiculously drugged up at the time of his arrest. And the fact is that, to sum all this up, that this trial was not a fair trial. No matter what you thought about Derek Chauvin, you need to keep this in mind. And because I've heard a lot of people talk about this, and there's so many things that happened in the trial that it's almost impossible to go through every single one of them. But let's be honest here for a second. This isn't about, and this trial isn't about, and our justice system in general, it's not about what you think that Derek Chauvin should have done. It's not what you think that he would have done. It's not because all we're doing is looking back on hindsight and being like, well, he shoulda, woulda, coulda, but he didn't. That's not what our justice system is built off of. That's not how you convict people, in case you have not realized yet. What this was based off of was Derek Chauvin's actions directly attributable, and I mean a substantial cause in George Floyd's death. That's what they needed to prove. He is innocent until proven guilty, not guilty until proven innocent. Because everybody that's talking about this, I guarantee you most of the people are speaking out of ignorance. They've seen one angle. They've seen that video clip from someone's cell phone. That's all they've seen. That's all they want to see. That's all the Democrat Party wants you to see. But they didn't see the body cam footage showing that his knee was never really on his neck at all. Okay, let's keep this in mind for a second. For the people that are sitting here thinking, oh, the video was pretty incriminating, his knee was never really on his neck at all. It was on his upper back. The medical examiners that the prosecution brought to the forefront to try to bring evidence to say that Derek Chauvin was guilty didn't even claim that any blood flow was cut off from the neck. They were both on the prosecution, these medical examiners that they brought in as witnesses to testify, were all saying that the actual pressure was on his back. It was the chest compression that they were arguing about. So when we're talking about these cases and what's happening, it's very important to know what it is that these actual situations are talking about, what they're dealing with, because it is extremely, extremely important. If we forget that, if we cut out the details to fit what we want it to fit, then what winds up happening is that we misrepresent the trial and what is actually taking place. This isn't about what he should have done. It's not about if he could have administered aid or if he didn't administer aid or this or that or the other. The position was in the police handbook. He was not on his neck. End of the discussion. Can you charge him with the murder knowing that George Floyd had enough drugs in the system to kill him regardless of whether that officer had his knee on his back or not? Keep in mind, they want to say, well, if Derek Chauvin never had his knee on him at all, no matter where it was, he would have been alive today. There's also many other situations where George Floyd would have been alive today. Number one, where he doesn't use a counterfeit $20 bill, basically trying to steal products from a store. Okay, there's another scenario where he'd be alive today where he doesn't take a lethal dose, 3 times the lethal dose of fentanyl and methamphetamine. There's also a situation where he could have done all of that stuff and never have been kicking officers, resisting arrest, and screaming to the top of his lungs, talking about his dead mother and how he's such a great guy. Meanwhile, refusing to sit in the car. If he would have sat in the car, he would be alive today. He was only on the ground, not because the officers wanted to put him on the ground. They didn't want him on the ground. They were trying to convince him to stay in the car with the air conditioning. He wanted to be put on the ground. There's many situations, and far more, that could have been preventing this situation that were up to him, not the officers at all. So there's a bit of this body cam footage that was shown. It's this girl named Makaya Bryant, 15 years old. She was attempting to stab somebody, another girl, with a knife. Okay, so what basically took place is that the police were called, by the way, by black people to come to this house because they were saying that there's this girl that they're trying to stab somebody. And so when they got on site there, I'm not going to show the actual video. If you are interested, it's on YouTube. I'm sure you can find many other places where it's at. But I'm not going to put it on here just for the sake of it being a bit hard to watch at times. But the point is that this girl was fighting with this other girl when the police got on the scene there. He had a knife and she was trying to stab this girl. So she literally was mid-swing, mid-stab, if you want to call it that, at this other black girl. And the cop shot her 4 times in the back to save the life of this other girl. Now, I'm wording this very carefully because the way that the media has shown this and talked about this has been entirely misrepresentative of what actually took place. So here's a bit of her mother, by the way, talking about the incident.
Makaya was named after a male prophet in the Bible. She was a very loving, peaceful little girl. She was 16 years old. She was an honor roll student. And Makaya had a motherly nature about her. She promoted peace. And that's something that I want to always be remembered.
Now, first of all, it doesn't matter how good your daughter was. It doesn't matter if she was an angel her whole entire life, and that applies to any of us. It doesn't matter how good of a person we are 99.99% of the time. All it takes is one really dumb mistake to cost us our lives. That could be driving drunk. It could be attacking somebody that has a gun on them anyways. It could be any of these situations. It could be running out in front of the street. It doesn't matter how good of a person you are. If you decide to commit a crime, especially in this situation where you're trying to actively stab somebody, which is very easy to kill somebody because stab wounds, believe it or not, are not. Knives are much more lethal than bullets in many situations. Bullets can sometimes pass right through you and do not much of anything. But a knife can do way more internal damage than a bullet ever could many times. And the point is that the mother in this situation is obviously going to try and paint her daughter in the best light. But she's lying, and you have to know that she's lying because guess what? Her daughter, she didn't even have custody of her. Her daughter was in foster care. Here she is talking about that she had such a motherly quality about her, and she's so nice and peaceful. She tried to peacefully stab the other girl is all that really happened, guys. I mean, come on, it was a peaceful fight. It's absolutely ridiculous the amount of loopholes these people had to jump through to try and validate what it is that they're doing. But let's take a second to look at the way the media has been painting this entire story. Because you have them looking at the cop, and they're basically saying, the cop should have done nothing. He should have just let her do it. It was just a knife. I mean, of course, the blue check marks on Twitter were trying to lie about this by saying she just had a knife. No, she was actively trying to stab somebody with a knife, okay? There's a very big difference there. So she has, the point is that the people on Twitter are trying to lie about this situation. But let's take a second, like I said, at the cop here. The cop, they're wanting him to have done nothing. But if he did nothing, what would the headlines have said? Cop refuses to save or stop fight in black community because he doesn't care about black lives. I mean, the cop is really stuck, and just any police officer at this point is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Because in this situation, if the cop were to shoot her, then they paint him as a murderer, as they are doing right now. And if he refuses to do anything, then they're telling him that, well, he was clearly not caring about any black lives, so he let that other girl stab this other girl. It's pretty crazy at this point where we automatically, and our media are automatically demonizing the cop no matter what they do. It's almost like they just don't want cops policing the community. Now, this may sound pretty harsh, but I said it online, and I'd say it again because it's exactly what probably needs to happen. Take these cops out of Chicago, out of Detroit, all of these cities that are majority black that think for some reason that the cops are so racist against them. Take them out of the community and see what happens. Leave them for a couple of weeks, because within no time, they're going to find out real quick that their own community is the biggest danger to themselves. It's not a white cop. It's themselves that are the problem, as it is with most of these types of cities like this and communities like this. Black people kill black people more than any other race kills themselves or anything else, even interchangeably. Black people kill more non-black people than any other race as well. And this isn't about being racist at all. This is just about looking at these stats. I mean, the numbers just don't lie. I mean, I wish we could say something else. I wish it wasn't that way, but it is that way. Why are we shying away from the facts of this situation? It is what it is. But once again, you had other people that were saying, well, 4 shots, why 4? Why not just 1? Why not shoot at their legs? Well, let's go ahead and debunk that really quick. First of all, the reason why you shoot 4 shots is that you need to shoot as many shots as possible to keep this girl from stabbing someone else. I don't know if you've seen, there's actually several videos showing some criminals that were, maybe it was just a criminal that was basically running towards a cop, and the cop fires once, the guy's still going. He fires twice, the criminal's still running at him, full speed. 3 times, still going at him. And then the guy had to actually fire like 7 times before this guy went down. Because when you have that adrenaline in you and you're actively in this mode of fighting, sometimes you don't even feel the bullet wounds until after the fact. And so that's why he did this. Remember, this was because he was trying to save a girl's life. Not because he was racist, but because he was trying to save a girl's life. And we have heard a little bit from that other girl that the girl was trying to stab, where she said, hey, she was coming at me with a knife. Like, I bet you she's not upset that cop saved her life. But BLM's mad. Blue check marks on Twitter are mad. Check out some of these media headlines that were running after this situation happened, okay? Now, keep in mind, it's very simple. Cop shows up to the scene, sees a girl trying to stab another girl with a knife, in the motion of doing so, not just trying to, in the motion of doing so, and shoots her and saves that girl's life. Look at these headlines. So this is from the Daily Beast. Body camera footage released by police late Tuesday showed officers pulling up to a chaotic scene where 3 girls appeared to be in the midst of a brawl. Appeared to be in the midst of a brawl? They were. There's no mention of a knife either. Okay, how about NPR? Makaya Bryant, a black teenage girl, was shot and killed by a white police officer in Columbus, Ohio, after she called 911 for help when a group of older kids threatened her, according to her family. That's kind of weird because she never called 911. It was actually someone else that called 911. It was never her. It's a lie. It's a blatantly false title. And why are we listing the races in there? Because we know if the situation was reversed, they would never actually put that in there, right? We've seen that happen many times. When the black person winds up killing a white officer or a white person in general, they don't put the race. But when it fits their narrative, they put it in there. That's interesting. How about the New York Times? Trusted name in news, right? So they say a teenage girl was fatally shot by police in Columbus, Ohio, officials said, shortly before a jury reached a guilty verdict in the murder trial of the former police officer Derek Chauvin in last year's killing of George Floyd. So they're kind of tailoring these two together, but it just says teenage girl fatally shot by police. No mention of the fact that she was trying to stab another girl. And then the Washington Post says Ohio police fatally shoot black teenage girl just before Chauvin verdict. Missing a lot of important details in this, aren't we? Aren't we? All of these headlines should be saying, cop saves girl. Simple. Because that's what he was actually trying to do. Don't you think what he was trying to do is more important than what actually took place necessarily? Because what he tried to do and what he did was actually save the life of another girl. A black girl. And they want to ignore all of that. Meanwhile, in the video, by the way, you've got the father of the suspect, kicking one of the girls on the ground. And he's one of the ones talking about, are you stupid? To the cop, she's just a kid, man. Dude, you were just kicking a girl that was on the ground. These people are ridiculous. LeBron James, of course, spared no time, basically making a threat towards the Columbus police officer saying, quote, "You're next," with a picture of the guy on Twitter. Real smooth, man. That's one way to unify the country, is to make veiled threats on Twitter. I mean, come on, LeBron. This guy's sitting up in his how many millions of dollars of mansions and everything, and he's going to sit here and act like he's oppressed. He's got his own security team. Like, come on, man. So later he, of course, deleted the tweet, and then he says, "I'm so dang, quote unquote dang, tired of seeing black people killed by police." Well, first of all, dude, how many are you talking about? Because it hasn't been that many. Keep in mind, white people are still dying by police day to day. You just don't hear about it on the news. And then he says, "I took the tweet down because it's being used to create more hate." Newsflash, dude, you are the one creating more hate. You made a threat towards a police officer. What do you mean? Don't blame us for your stupid tweet. Then he says, "This isn't about one officer. It's about the entire system. And they always use our words to create more racism. I am more desperate for more accountability." Or "I am so desperate for accountability." They always say accountability. Once again, the left chewing words, trying to change what they actually mean. What it means is trials where you basically just give somebody or charge them with some type of ridiculous sentence, just like Derek Chauvin, whether that's manslaughter or murder, where it doesn't even apply because you feel like it needs to be there for some reason. That's what he's talking about by accountability. His tweet in and of itself, that first one, was hateful. It was hateful towards police in general, and it's hateful towards the guy that was actually trying to save the life of that other girl. And now there's this video that shows the BLM protesters that were in Minneapolis and shows exactly, I guess, what their feelings are about race in America.
You can burn the whole city down. What does it matter?
So I say burn the city down, so they can see that we're here, continue the movement.
Do you think the city's going to burn down?
Yes, absolutely.
No question about it?
No. And that'll be the least of our problems.
By burning all the city down, we'll teach them a lesson?
I think, honestly, I'm all for burning it down. There shouldn't even be a trial. He should be convicted just as is.
If he got off, would you support street justice on him?
Yes. Y'all should have fed him to the wolves a long time ago.
How many unarmed black people were killed by cops last year? You have any idea?
100 plus? In just Minnesota?
No, around the country.
Oh, thousands.
Unarmed black people.
Thousands.
Seems like they're trying to erase, destruct the whole race of, the African-American race.
Would you consider this a genocide? It's the eradication of an entire people.
That's a good question, and now that I've been confronted with it, I'm going to go ahead and say yes.
I mean, genocide means like the targeting of one race for its destruction. Do you think that's what they're doing?
Genocide of anybody that's not white.
Would you call what's happening a genocide?
Yeah, I think that's one word for it.
Genocide?
Yes, most definitely.
A genocide?
Yeah.
We need another civil war in this country in order for us to have true justice.
If that's what it takes, then we have to do it.
Do we need another civil war now?
If that's what it takes, then I believe so. If that's what it's going to take to revamp everything, for everything to be equal, at least equal, for us to have justice, I believe so.
Will it happen? Probably.
What % of this country are white supremacists?
Say most of the country. I can't give you a number, but
You say majority of the country?
Yeah.
Should we just gather up the white supremacists and do street justice?
That would be ideal. Again, I'm not going to say anything that would directly incriminate me, but I would say that would be a good idea. I don't want to say we need to go start killing all white folks, but it's like,
but
maybe they need to feel the pain and the hurt.
So yeah, that last line there is extremely just evil. And this really just showcases exactly what we're dealing with. These people live among us. Scary as that is. These people are all around us that legitimately see America as not just this country in which maybe they feel like it's somehow oppressing them in some way, which is of course not at all, but that they also literally see that and think that every white person somehow is racist and all of this. I mean, what a terrible way to live your life. And how ignorant do you have to be to fall into the left's traps about this kind of stuff? And really what this kind of makes me think about is when I was, we live in this society where everybody has access to the internet. Everyone is able to look up whatever they want very quickly and easily. Right now, there's no excuse not to know something if you really wanted to know it. And yet you have these people here that are just so ignorant. They don't even know what it's like or what it was like to be living in slavery. They have no idea what took place then. They just want their version of it now. They want a reason to complain because the left has made it fashionable to be a victim. And those people are all running around on the street thinking that it's fun to say this. That somehow it's a good thing. And you even had, like, after the whole Derek Chauvin trial, like when they were announcing the verdict, you had his family that was sitting there, and as they were announcing all the charges that they were that he was guilty on, you had them sitting there clapping like, oh yeah, yeah. And it's like, guys, do you even know what you're clapping for? Do you even know the definition of the charges you're charging this man with? Do you even care? Or are we just in a situation where you just want the man to suffer in the worst way possible and you don't even know what it is that you're even clapping for at all? That is, I think, the real concerning part about all of this. These people don't even understand truly what they're protesting. They think they do, but they don't. And they are literally, in our society, trying to make light or make sense of all of this stuff, but they refuse to actually look at the facts surrounding everything. So just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon where you can donate directly to the show. And if you would please remember to leave a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, as it does help the show out. The city of Chicago is now looking at having officers ask for permission before chasing down suspects on foot. And if you think that sounds pretty dumb, well, you are absolutely correct. How in the world does that make any sense at all when we're talking about cops doing their jobs? They have to be able to do them, correct? Well, at least in the eyes of Lori Lightfoot, she doesn't think so. So she actually told the media on Wednesday that she is considering instituting a momentous change to Chicago police procedure following the police-involved shooting death of 13-year-old Adam Toledo. This is the Hispanic kid that was out at 3 o'clock in the morning with a handgun. The cops were actually going in pursuit of him because he was firing. He fired an entire clip of a gun into just random cars in traffic or on the road at that time. And the cops were trying to figure out who this guy was. They pulled him over. The cops started chasing after him. He turned around pulled the gun out of his pocket, turned around, and the cop shot him as he was kind of dropping the gun to the ground. It all happened literally in the blink of an eye. So now they're saying that they're going to be requiring that all police department officials or officers receive express permission from a supervisor before engaging in a foot chase. That's something that they're realistically looking at doing. It goes on to say, this is from her, quote, "No one should die as a result of a foot chase," Lori Lightfoot said, adding that the city plans to unveil the policy change soon. Well, the fact is that people, if they are legitimately turning around with a gun, that's problematic. I mean, it wasn't like the guy was just legitimately just running away and then he just got shot because he was running away. That's not actually what happened at all. He pulled a gun out of his pocket. That's what the cop saw and turned around. Okay, yeah, he dropped it while he was turning around, but how is the cop supposed to know he's not just going to do that? I mean, there's a second to make a decision of whether you're going home or not at night. And so she goes on and says that Alderman Brian Hopkins says an official in the mayor's office told him officers could soon be required prior to a foot chase to do what is now required before a vehicle chase, getting permission from higher ups. Okay, let's play this out. Let's play this out for a second, okay? If this makes sense, let's see how this is gonna work. All right, hey sir, I know you're running away from me, but if you wouldn't mind just pausing for a second while I call my supervisor, that's probably gonna take a few minutes, and see if he's okay with me chasing you right now. Okay, officer, let me know when I can start running again. Yeah, that's what? How do they think this makes any sense? They really just don't want cops to do their job. That's why I said earlier, hey, pull them out of the city then, man. Just get rid of them. Get rid of them and let this community see how many of these issues are their own problems and that cops are only helping the situation, not making it worse. So she goes on saying, or one of the commentators was actually talking about this, and he said, of course that raises some obvious problems. In the time it would take to do that, the person you're supposed to be chasing is likely long gone. The point would be moot then, which of course is common sense. It doesn't make sense to actually have that implemented whatsoever. Everything they try to do is to keep cops from doing their job. That's what they want to do. They want to disarm cops. They want to enable them from keep them from being able to do what they're supposed to be doing, which is protecting the lives of others and protecting themselves if necessary to mitigate crimes. That was the whole goal. We've never had questions over policing for many, many years, and then all of a sudden, they're wanting to get rid of them. Once again, it's not hurting the people that are advocating for these things because they have their own security detail. Lori Lightfoot has her own security officers and people that attend to only her. She probably also lives in a very nice gated community far away from any of the suburbs where these things take place the most. So they can sit there all day talking about defund the police, but it's not going to hurt them. Who it does hurt are the actual people in the black community. The more regulations you add, the more you're keeping cops from doing what they need to be able to do. Good or bad or whatever you want to call them. It's kind of like gun regulation, isn't it? You're only disarming and hurting the people that did it the right way, legally, not the people that are doing it the wrong way. So there's this, just a different story here. There's this mother, Courtney Ann Taylor. She's a mother in Georgia, and she's talking about the fact that she and her child have had it with the mask mandates.
Every month I come here and I hear the same thing: social emotional health. If you truly mean that, you would end the mask requirement tonight. Tonight. This is not March 2020 anymore. We have 3 vaccines. Every adult in the state of Georgia that wants that vaccine is eligible to get it right now, and every one of us knows that young children are not affected by this virus. They're not, and that's a blessing. But as the adults, what have we done with that blessing? We've shoved it to the side and we've said, we don't care. You're still going to wear a mask on your face every day, 5 and 6-year-olds. You still can't play together on the playground like normal children, 7 and 8-year-olds. We don't care. We're still going to force you to carry a burden that was never yours to carry. Shame on us. My 6-year-old looks at me every month before I come here and she says, are you going to tell them tonight? Tell them I don't want to wear this anymore. And I say, baby, it's not time to fight that battle yet. I try to explain that there's so many things. But it's April 15th, 2021, and it's time. Take these masks off of my child. And I know what I'm going to be met with. But Ms. Taylor, the CDC, we did not vote for people at the CDC. We did elect leaders who do create policy. We elected the 5 of you. We chose you to make difficult decisions for our children. We chose you to make decisions that would be in our children's best interest, and forcing 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9-year-old little children to cover their noses and their mouths where they breathe for 7 hours a day, every day for the last 9 months for a virus that you know doesn't affect them. That is not in their best interest, and this has to stop. Defend our children. My 6-year-old can't come up here and say this. It has to stop. Take these off of our children.
Kids should be given a choice about the masks. Once again, if they work so well, then what is the problem with another child not having them on? And the ones that need it or want one on, they're free to put one on. Why are they forcing this to happen? I mean, they've kicked families off of planes over this stuff. It's pretty crazy when you look at this. I don't think that this is one of those situations where Democrats are looking at the statistics, because this is where they ignore the statistics. As usual, this is usually what they do. Because if they were actually paying attention to it, like she mentions in the video, then it's very obvious that kids are not the vulnerable ones at all when it comes down to the virus. The more people that stand up, though, the better we have a chance of actually fighting back against these schools, doing these and making these weird decisions like this. Because not only are many schools still closed, by the way, but many of them are still requiring these masks. So the school closure thing is a big issue as well. Why aren't the schools open? We know that kids don't have a very high likelihood at all of getting this virus, or at least in the sense of being super sick from it or anything. So why are schools still closed entirely? Because it begs the question at this point. But Democrats don't want to pay attention to those statistics. And schools are extremely important. And I think people have neglected their importance, and we're going to wind up seeing, I guarantee you, over the next few years, the loss of time and how that has actually played into kids that have not been able to go to school. Because even if they're able to do a virtual school or whatever, they have that option, many parents don't have the ability to keep their kids engaged with it. It takes a lot more work on the parents. And when you have the situation happen where apparently, I think there was a report I saw that was like 5 to 6% of kids in the public school system have been lost. Like, they don't have any record of them anymore because the school was the place where they got their food. Think about it. The school lunches, remember that stuff? The school provided meals. The only meals some of those kids got that were poor it was the only place where they had the ability to maybe be in some type of air conditioning. It was everything for them. And some of those kids have been lost entirely to the system because they don't have computers and stuff at home. The schools can't afford them. And now they're just left behind. What are we going to see the actual consequences in a few years when we look back on this and say, wow, we should have had these schools open the entire time. So it just plays in with the masks and all of that stuff like that. In a bit of a different story here also, Democrats now, as of today, have passed a bill to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state. This is one of those things that Democrats have been trying to do for a while now. This is not new. Don't think for any second that this is somehow some new endeavor that they've gone on. They've been talking about it for years. They tried to do it about 2 years ago as well, in 2018. But basically in this one, the House voted, and it was a 216 to 208 party line vote on Thursday. The House of Representatives approved the legislation, like I said, to make Washington, D.C. a 51st state of the nation. The bill will now be sent to the U.S. Senate, where it is unlikely to pass, to say it in the best way possible. So this is the second time, as I mentioned before, that the House has tried to approve such legislation in 2 years. But the statehood bill, long a goal for the nation's capital, faces an uphill battle to the Senate, evenly divided between the two parties at this point. Now, remember, if it does split directly in the middle, Kamala Harris will be the tiebreaker in that situation. Winning a vote in the Senate will likely require ending the filibuster, which requires most legislation to clear a 60-vote hurdle. Even then, not all 50 Democrats in the Senate back making D.C. a state. So that's going to be their biggest problem, too, is that some Democrats are more on the moderate line and are like, it doesn't make any sense either. But why are they doing this? What is the ultimate goal behind this? It always has been, and will continue to be, the fact that they are trying to add more Democrat seats to the Senate. That's what this is about. They don't care about anything else other than that. They're saying, we want to make sure that the voices of DC are heard and that they're represented. That's not what this is about. This is simply about them trying to add more power to the Senate, because the Senate has been fairly split, or very, very closely split, for a while. Tipping it in one direction guarantees them a Senate majority pretty much, unless another state goes way kind of the other way. So this is why they're actually trying to pull that off. Now, the Justice Department has repeatedly concluded, under administrations of both parties, that D.C. statehood requires amending the entire Constitution, but it defines D.C. as a permanent constitutional entity of its own, outside of statehood. Okay? That's the reason why D.C. is not a state, should not be a state, regardless of whether it was Republican or not. But if it was majority Republican, then you can pretty much bet that whole situation that they would not be talking about that today. That's the way that Democrats are going to push this, is just uprooting everything in America, everything that we know, everything that's fundamental to our Constitution. It's all about uprooting that, because it's an obstacle in their way. The Constitution isn't something to be followed for them. It's something that they need to get around somehow. And this is the first of many steps in that entire direction. So that is all I have for you today. I thank you for watching or listening to the show, and I will see you back on Monday next week. You just watched an episode from The William Hall Show. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.